I'm starting to look at a notebook containing notes from about 2 years ago. And anyway, to jump to right to the literature, the first note says, with the terms, the right data structure is a graph, not a strict dictionary. But apparently the terms are cut from anonymous thoughts. And we encounter this note again for the first time in a long time. This is an act of review, revisitation, and so on. What do we mean by the terms? The writer refers to a project to establish a dictionary for philosophy, not necessarily philosophy as one unified discipline as such, but for the most part for his own philosophy. An attempt thus to pick out the key words in the literature that he has more or less spontaneously assembled over the past 15 years or so. And perhaps in an effort to derive the same benefit that mathematics derives from its precision with respect to terms, before which theorems may be drawn, for them at least. And let's have one final look at the addendum to the note, a kind of comment appended to the end. But apparently the terms are cut from anonymous thoughts. What I mean is that any term, whether it's one word together or two or a compound word and so on, that these terms are themselves not the first things. They're cut from a kind of anomalous prime matter, which itself is not definite, but which supplies everything in the beginning, and only thereafter are definite species themselves distinguishable from each other, but from the original cosmic nebula, so to speak. It's hard to but something bothers me. What might be an example of a term? Perhaps if I look further in the notebook, we have terms like sentence, or also science, and also mechanical model, which relates to science, of course. Also, I see the word God. I wonder what that means. So, yeah, and also, again, one more, just alphabet. What's an alphabet? Probably, perhaps, a collection of symbols employed in the writing of a language, whether we write sentences in a language or mere words in a language. What is a language? Well, that's a question to ask as we assemble a dictionary, perhaps. And yeah, so I guess to cultivate the much too muchness of rampant philosophical output, though mostly hidden in notebooks and journals, we had need of some kind of dictionary to order things. And thus the dictionary itself was not the first thing. Philosophy is not synthetic. A thought is not the convergence of already known mere smaller building blocks becoming something more sophisticated, as Aristotle himself had taught, the wood in a wooden table is merely the material cause to be distinguished, for example, from the formal cause, which is the plan or the design. And no, I'm not talking naively about theology. But on that vein, the efficient cause or the maker of the table is also one of Aristotle's four causes. With respect to cause and effect, or cause and work, Aristotle is, for the most part, not talking about the kind of mechanical causation prevalent in modern science, that is, modern physics, in which, or for which, motions are mostly reduced to uniform movements, not, of course, fundamental changes, but a change. There's a plant behind me, a plant, there's a dresser or a bureau or an armoire, whatever name you would assign to that thing over there, if my finger's pointing in the right direction. Now it is. I have a bed behind me, a wall, and so on. But if these things move, their prediction of motion has nothing to do with their species whatsoever. But to finish enumerating Aristotle's causes, because it's an important philosophical concept that will come up, the final cause among these four causes is itself the final cause. It's the purpose. Why was the table made? Perhaps so mankind, as merely one species among species, could eat thereupon and enjoy his food undisturbed. Undisturbed by what? I don't know. By having to sit on the ground if it's not so comfortable. Although paintings of the Bacchanal suggest otherwise. And the same question could be asked of this desk right here. I don't know if you can see it. That again, because sometimes it's necessary to hide books written by persona or personae non gratae. So anyway, we have a desk here, and so I have a glass here. Now this is called a glass, but it's made of glass. It's actually something to drink from. So the material cause is actually coincident with the name of the thing, as obvious as that sounds. So, but I don't know. Take a pause and consider that thing, because is the name of something more like its material cause, or its formal cause, its plan, design? Because, and I guess in all these videos, the output isn't just going to be what you, as a viewer, learn as a supposed student. In many ways, I'm the teacher and the student. And it may be that nobody watches these except myself 1 year hence. And so the output or the result, the effect maybe, of these videos has to be not just what's learned, but what ought to be learned. So tasks need to be appointed, not necessarily to you. I mean, it would be great if all the questions that I have, which are tasks thus to be done, could be answered by the immense audience in the comments section down below, whatever platform these videos are hosted on, if user interaction is allowed and so on. But yeah, this is the glass, and it's made of glass. And this thing right here, this is a desk, and I believe it's made of wood. It seems to be real wood. It's painted blue, which kind of obscures that fact. But we don't call it a wood. It's a wooden desk. And again, the task to be appointed is to distinguish between wood and wooden, which I suppose is an adjective, like gold and golden. A ring may be made of gold, and thus it's a golden ring. And of course, whoever has read Tolkien has to think of some joke, whatever the literary merit of J.R.R. Tolkien and his fiction, of course. And where were we? What's the point of this video? Well, let's reposition the camera once again and show something. So this is the first page of a notebook. I ought to take a photograph of it so I can actually archive these notebooks so they're reviewable if I'm not at home, which happens to happen in this age of coronavirus and remote work. And anyway, so I have a notebook, and typically in these notebooks, when a thought occurs to me spontaneously, I will write it down. It will come up. It will be like a secretion, like sweat or like tears, like breath, but a special breath. It's an act of insight, a sudden drawing into the breath, or sometimes eureka, and sometimes when you shout eureka, it's always eureka. Anyway, an analysis or an interpretation of just one note with the terms, the right data structure. It's an allusion to computer science. Which science? Computer science. Is a graph. A graph is a collection of nodes in a network. Like this device right here is on the internet. Your device is on the internet. This might be a device on the internet as well, besides the home network, and so on. And links might be drawn between edges in the network. But anyway, with the terms, the right data structure is a graph, not a strict dictionary. So typically in a dictionary, and I don't have one, but let's pretend that this book here, Chaucer, Riverside Chaucer, let's pretend it's a dictionary. So in a traditional dictionary, without a unnecessary knock on tradition, but you would have the terms arranged in alphabetical order. So in English, that would be from A to Z, and you'd prefer, for some reason, to order things by the first letter, and maybe caps come before lowercase, and so on, whatever the order. But you would write your terms down in this dictionary, pretend it's a dictionary, Riverside Dictionary, and sometimes you would refer to other terms though. So I suppose with the dictionary, each definition, each term and definition pairs like a node in that network, right? And it may be linked to one term, two, or really many other terms that it refers to. But as the note itself says, the terms are cut from anonymous thoughts. An anonymous thought is a note, for example, just like any of the four. I don't know if you can see that. Position the thing so it's on the camera, but an anonymous thought. Anonymous doesn't have a title, so it just has an address. I know where it is in the notebook, but what is it? I leave that question unanswered, but not even asked. I don't ask the question, well, what is this? But I know it's genus. It is a note. It's a spontaneous output or secretion as a biological metaphor, not to knock biology, but the logy in biology. And what more? Any term, and that any term is cut from an anonymous thought originally, means that the richness of the terms is not to be determined by, how many other terms they refer to, or even how few, thus how special they are, and thus how much weight they carry in a philosophy if a term occurs only once, for example. But their value, I don't know, their breadth, it really comes from the original living episodes of thought and action, albeit only between one individual and himself, when he reviews his own thoughts from 2 years ago and thus simulates conversation finally 2 years later, but when the original thoughts are deep buried in a long-term memory and not obliterated. Finally, it can be said consists of two aspects. One is really a literature, which may be raw notes in a diary and notebook, or even in letters to other philosophers, friends, contemporaries, or in this day and age, emails. You'd be surprised how much value emails from, say, 9 years ago might have in revealing to you the fundamental core of your truths when you lived in a more mythical or childish manifestation of yourself. Because we're always the same and the same and the same. People that believe, they go through fundamental changes or whatever, they don't truly know themselves. They don't ask what they repeat, and not asking the question have no answer whatsoever. But go back to music, theme and variations on a theme by Paganini, written by, of course, Rachmaninoff. And that was the theme in the ice skating scene in the movie Ronin from 1998 with Robert De Niro, Jean Reno, Natasha McElhone, Jonathan Pryce. It consists of its literature and, in this case, it's grammar on the one hand, but that grammar might be a dictionary, but also rules, precepts, and so on. Something that can be taught as a kind of catechism. But a philosophy. So yeah, I say that there may be three parts, there may be none more, and so on. Just a rule of thumb for the time being, because obviously the literature of philosophy is going to dwarf its actual grammar, and the grammar only has any value. And for example, just dictionary terms, but terms might be frequent terms of phrase that approach the value of conjunctions, adversatives in modern language, for example, or prepositions. And so we'll have to talk about linguistic functions in another video. But for example, Nietzsche says one thing is just a special case of another. I'm trying to think of a good example. So, task appointed. Don't worry if memory fails. Task appointed. Find a good example of a linguistic function. So we recall Nietzsche's frequent use of is just a special case of. That's how you would say it in a computer science or computer programming fashion. And again, which science? Well, in this case, computer science. And I mention that because the note is permeated with the computer science influence by the term the right data structure is a graph. We're talking about graph. A graph might be a social network, for example. Much abused, overused example of a graph. Or is a graph an example of a social network?